All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of the Ignite Your Life show. I'm Elisa Planellas, and I'm here with Guillermo Vidal. Guillermo, what's our topic for today?
Hi, Elisa. Looks like nice blue skies where you're at. Uh,
It sure,
yeah, look at that.
it
It's
sure.
beautiful there. Yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway, today's topic is defining and setting and enforcing your personal boundaries.
Oh boy, we have to go there. Do we have to?
Well, we could always change topics, but it's a good one to talk about. And
It is.
I think we should start out by defining what we mean by personal boundaries. So to me, and I think I want your definition as well. To me, is like the rules of engagement that you set for yourself by which to deal with the world and to deal with other people. Like for example, using a small one is like you don't like people to get closer, say, than 3 feet from you. That's a physical boundary, but it's like what are the things that you set up for yourself that make you comfortable and make you feel safe?
Right. Well,
So
for me, God, it has to go so far more inside because no matter what you do, like something goes on in life, right? And so if you say have these rules about you and you're trying to enforce them, then you're always you're always going to be trying to enforce these rules. So for me, it's you know how you want to carry yourself, you know how you want your life to be, how you want it to flow, how you expect to feel, right? And you stay within those. So for example, if you've got a 3 feet foot personal boundary about you, I feel comfortable as long as he stays over there, right? But then there's this one, you get that one that comes along that doesn't care, you know, and you're gonna let that person then draw you into an argument and throw off your day. So then there's a different set of boundaries that you have to have. The second set. That's I also count those as personal boundaries too.
well, I mean that's a good example. So I think boundaries can change, of course, or you can manage to let them go for a minute if you need to. Like if someone, have you ever met someone who just gets right in your face, right in your space to talk to you? And it's not that they're being rude, it's just that that's what they're used to. You find yourself moving back from them. It's okay to say, you know what, you mind just being, I'm a little uncomfortable. You mind being a little bit away from me? But people feel uncomfortable doing that because they're afraid of offending the other person. And see, that's where I think the reason this example may be a good one is that's what we've been taught to do. And that's why so many of us have trouble enforcing our boundaries because our parents and our teachers and what have you said, you're supposed to be nice to everyone, especially when you're a child. You're supposed to be nice to adults. You're supposed to follow the rules. So
Yeah.
often, if there's something that makes you uncomfortable, whether it's in a relationship, in a work situation, or whatever, you might put up with it because you don't want to offend or upset the other person. But what happens with that is you end up people pleasing all the time, and then you don't have a good definition for yourself, or at least that's what I found for me.
Right. Right. Well, no, for me it's like, yeah, you've got that personal space. And you also want to be able, when someone is doing this, you want to be able to respond. You want to let them know that this is your boundary. You want to communicate that and say, hey, correct the situation. But at the same time, that should not be an automatic emotional reaction. I think I'm more concerned with the most no response that people give when trying to defend their territory, that they
Yeah,
feel like that's my bound.
yeah, but so let's think about other examples. Personal space is a small one, but let's say you have a friend that always, when it comes to, you have lunch often, and always when it comes to paying the bill, that friend always kind of takes off or whatever, and then you always end up paying the bill. And,
Hmm.
it's starting to annoy you because you're thinking, okay, once or twice is okay, but every time we get together for lunch, I always end up having to pay. Well, maybe you're rich and that's fine with you. Maybe that's not a boundary, but maybe you're like the rest of us and you think, you know what? Sometimes I pay, sometimes you pay. I'm not trying to keep anything down to the penny, but eventually this person becomes accustomed to you paying. And then one day you go, hey, you ever going to pay for lunch? And maybe that's a wrong way to say it, but you say, hey, it's your turn. And then that person gets offended. Like, what do you mean it's my turn? I come to these lunches because you pay, and
Right.
those are, I mean, that an example, maybe that has never happened to you, but that's a kind of example, is that we let someone get used to, in essence, take advantage of us. And then rather than confront them with it after, say, the second or third lunch, you wait till 2 or 3 years go by before you confront them with it, and then they're offended because that, for them, you paying became the standard operating procedure with you.
You know, one
Does that make sense?
it does, but it seems that we would always be in some way trying getting ourselves into that situation, because unless you have the experience before you enter a situation to know to lay these things out in the forefront, then you
Right,
always run into some situation where you didn't even know this was something that bothered you.
right, right. Maybe it just piled on after a while, but even that's okay. I think the reason we're talking about this, that it's okay for you to say at whatever time, if something's making you uncomfortable, it's okay for you to say, hey, you know what, enough. I'm not going to put up with that anymore. I'm going to say no today to this request or whatever. I'm thinking another one. Say that you're a young woman in the workplace, and you're working with mostly guys, and they make a lot of sexual comments, and
Oh,
they make you uncomfortable. And in their mind, they may think they're doing something innocent, but that's immaterial.
right.
But you started putting up with it because you didn't want to create any you know commotion or any hostility in the workplace, and you thought, oh well, I can put up with that. But over time, you're hearing this day in and day out, and it offends, it makes you feel bad. Your attitude about going to work, you may not know that it's related to that, but your attitude is bad. You don't feel safe there. You don't feel like you're well liked. Maybe you're feeling like all you are is a sexual ornament for these people, or that you're just some token woman that they hire there. And a lot of it has to do with you're so dissatisfied that you were not able to say right from the beginning, hey, you guys, I find that offensive, which is very appropriate to say to put a stop to it. Now you find yourself that to bring that up, everybody's going to get upset with you because you put up with it for so long. And all I'm
Right.
saying is, fine, even if you find that out then, it's still okay to say, hey, you guys, I've had enough. This needs to stop. And that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
In fact, I encourage you to enforce your boundaries you know, when you feel it's necessary, whatever they may be.
That's basically letting it out so it doesn't get all bottled up. I think that's where a lot of people begin to get emotional about it in their response in telling, or anger or whatever it is because they felt it all along. They felt it and they didn't want to say anything. And then they felt it and they didn't want to say anything.
Right.
And maybe if they had said it earlier, they could have found a nicer way to say it, right? Because they were more calm then. But then they continued to feel it and it got annoying until it's just like this emotional outburst about it. And
Yeah.
so it's basically speak up when something's bothering you instead of
Yeah.
letting it take control over you.
Well, and to honor the fact that if something bothers you, there's something to that it's your boundaries. You're the one living inside your skin. So if something is bothering you, then it has to do with your boundaries. There's something that's happening that's making you feel like disrespected, or that someone is stepping across the line. The
You know
problem
what
is
it
that,
sounds like?
go ahead.
It sounds like boundary discovery. It sounds
Yeah.
like that those feelings, while you think they're such a negative experience for you, they're actually showing you what your boundaries are, and you're learning yourself.
That's exactly how it works for me. You know, but
Yeah.
I've always been, I'm not excusing. I was the youngest in the family, and I was obviously the weakest. You know, when I was a baby and a toddler and stuff, and you'd learn to tolerate. Let's say your brother's pushing you around or whatever, and then you grow up with that, because fighting back may get you hurt, or then as you get older you just don't want to cause any commotion. You're used to it, and the hell with it or whatever, but it does bother you. So when you finally the problem with enforcing your boundaries is that when you finally do it, and somebody, the people who are used to taking advantage of you, or who are used to that behavior from you, they get pissed off because now you're being firm, and then they think you're some kind of asshole for having done that.
Right.
But the fact is that that still should not stop you from finally saying, hey, you know what, enough. I don't like that, please stop that. And and if the person is mad at you and doesn't want to stop and starts treating you badly, frankly, that's not a person you want in your life.
Exactly.
That's what I think. That's what I think enforcing your boundaries does for you, is that it applies definition for you, and then it often shows you the reality of the people who you're dealing with that are taking advantage of you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't tell you, but for me, I don't know. I have always been the person that's so self-conscious, right? I don't know if it's less fear about what someone's reaction will be, or do I handling myself up to the way my own expectations of myself, you know? It's like, oh, I don't know if whatever they respond to, we're going to be able to manage getting into this rabbit hole with this person, you know, and how far
Yeah.
this is going to go. And what, this relationship's basically, what is it? Is it worth it? you know, or you're going to end up looking embarrassed after it? Are you going to be able to live with yourself? What it is. So those type of things. So when you have a real sense of yourself and you're around people that they you're holding your boundaries, and they're generally not responding with the respect that you feel that you should have,
Yeah.
and you're in that situation, then it can be very upsetting, so
I think enforcing your boundaries takes courage, and it's risky. Absolutely.
yeah.
And then I think if you're doing it to hurt the other person, that you're getting angry and then you insult the other person and doing it, no, then you're out of bounds. But I think it does, it is difficult. Like, I'm thinking of a situation. I remember a friend of mine, um, she was getting upset because her daughter and her husband, whenever they just wanted to dump the kids on, they wanted a night out or whatever, or they wanted to do some activity, they would just call mom and dad. They would call her and her husband and say, hey, we're bringing the kids over. Well, this was happening often, and the lady friend of mine was feeling like, my God, I feel taken advantage of. I'm like the built-in babysitter for whenever they want, and there's no consideration for, well, maybe my husband and I had something planned or whatever. But she wouldn't tell her daughter no, for fear that her daughter would get mad and not let her see the kids, and then and not let her see her grandkids. So, I mean, that's a horrible complication, right? By the way, I'm just using
Yeah.
daughter because that's factual. I know a lot of sons who do the same thing. They just take it. They're so used to their parents giving them everything they want, that then eventually they think nothing of taking advantage of their parents. In fact, they do it naturally. So breaking those kinds of boundaries is really hard. I get it. It is.
that That is depth of topic, Guillermo, because that goes not just into people of their enforcing their personal boundaries, but the level of discipline in that relationship between parent and child in the first place. Because to me, the parent should be able to communicate at any moment that there's something, that is less than preferable for them, and that the child needs to make some type of change and have that child respond and be used to that pattern, because the parent is raising the child and taking them to different levels. So if a child is stuck somewhere where you can't tell them, no, come on, you need to do it this way, you can't guide them to any type of knowledge, that's a whole different level right there.
Yeah, it is. But but to me, like if mom thinks that enforcing boundaries is to tell her daughter how to raise her kid, no, I don't think that's a personal boundary. That's just your opinion. I'm talking about you don't feel good. You feel like you're taken advantage of.
Okay.
And that's when you have to say, hey, you know what? Enough's enough. But
Right.
there's complicated situations, and you certainly have to weigh what you're risking when you enforce your boundaries. But I still say, if you don't enforce your boundaries, you'll never get a grip on who you are.
Right. Right. But that moment when you do begin to get a grip on who you are, you'll find that those boundaries that you once thought were okay are a little bit tighter than you thought sometimes. And in that moment, you'll begin to find that you're having to try to enforce those boundaries all over the place because nobody in your life, nobody is familiar with you having these boundaries.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
it's
And
like,
that's why I
yes, I
say, then they think you're just being a jerk for doing that.
right. They really don't get you. There's tension in the air. Like, no, like I'm this person. Like I grew. I'm this way. This, now, and
Yeah,
they're used to you being one way, and because say you left your childhood home, and you went to live somewhere else, and you grew and you had life experience, and then you come back, and all of everybody in your family expects you, to be a certain way, that's just no longer is not a part of you. It's like, how do you go around enforcing these boundaries? You'll be exhausted in the first place, and it will
well,
test
but
your emotions. It was like,
yeah,
oh, I'm getting upset, but so if you to have that is a skill in itself, that the feeling, the control of maintaining your sense of self, even when there are boundaries that you're either the boundaries are there and you know about them, or they're ones that you didn't know that you had, to
yeah,
manage that, actual taking that hold of that boundary and owning it, and being able to communicate it with others no matter what the stage of the relationship is. That's mastery. That's
yeah.
mastery.
It is, but I think you can only take it one step at a time. Like
Yeah.
maybe you start doing things like, if you're used to asking, say, your husband's opinion for how you should dress to go to work that morning because he's been really controlling, then just start with something that little, that you just go, you know what, I'm just going to wear what I want today.
Right.
And then you start mastering a little bit at a time. But then the others there's big things that are obvious. Let's take that same example, that the husband comes home one day and tells his wife, you know what, I think we should have an open marriage. We can stay married, but why not see other people and add that variety? And inside you're going, that's not for me. that
Right.
that is a game changer of major proportions.
Right.
But in order to keep the peace, or you start thinking, but oh my God, then that means I may have to get divorced, and that's going to affect me financially. Will I have to move out of the house? This, that, and the other, and then you let all your fears,
Take over you, like
to all
holding
your
that.
fears, and then to tell your husband, well, let's look into it. When in fact, inside, that that's just not for you. And I,
I think you gave the perfect response to that from the first sentence. When he says that, you turn to him and go, "That is a game changer. That's not
yeah,
for me."
yeah, and if you
And you
go that
go on
way, I'm not staying married to you, and I
to
and then you deal with the consequences. But a lot of us, because of our fears, then we let go of the boundaries. And I certainly grew up being a people pleaser. And so I can tell you, my boundaries were so blurred that I got to the point where I didn't even know who I was. I just felt I realized that what I had done was successfully become a doormat for every person who came into my life and every
Wow.
relationship and what have you. And then when you start enforcing it, what you find is, boy, the people who love you actually say, hey, I understand, let's work together with that. And the people who were just used to taking advantage of you, they get mad at you and they go another way. Frankly, I discovered that, well, then those weren't friends that were worth having. But I
Right.
know that's easier said than done. But in the end, if you enforce your boundaries and at least make yourself safe and allow yourself to live within the things that make you happy and make you feel like you're engaging in life in a positive, constructive way, that's much better than trying to keep the peace with whomever is in your life that enforcing the boundaries would make them mad at you.
Right. Well, Guillermo, that's our show for this week.
Okay. That I think it was. What do you think? Was it a pretty good one?
I think it was a great one.
Yeah, it gives a. It's certainly given me a lot more to think about, but hopefully it gives others a lot to think about too.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the way you can't manage life unless you get your head on straight. It's
Yeah,
really important, even if you need some guidance on it, need some assistance.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Until next week.
Okay, Elisa. Nice to see you. Stay
Nice to.
safe.
All right.